That night, lying in our tent, with the desert wind rattling the fabric, I couldn't sleep. My muscles ached, my palms were raw from scraping stone, and my mind kept replaying the narrowest squeezes, the slips, the moment my wife had frozen, halfway down the crack. I realized just how thin the line had been, between adventure and disaster. One wrong step, one broken bone, and the story would have ended very differently. I propped myself up and listened. The desert was alive, in a way you don't notice during the day. Coyotes called somewhere in the distance, their yips echoing off canyon walls. A night breeze carried the dry scent of sagebrush, mixed with the faint tang of cooling sandstone. Every sound felt sharper in the dark, every breath deeper. The fire had burned out, but the stars burned brighter than any flame could, stretching from one horizon to the other, in a sweep so vast it almost hurt to look at. Beside me, my wife finally slept, her breathing steady. I thought about the fall she'd taken, the panic in her eyes as she pressed against the canyon wall, and the strength it had taken for her to keep moving forward. I felt humbled, not only by the desert, but by her resilience. She'd trusted me, even when my bright idea had led us straight into danger. That trust was worth more than anything else the wilderness could teach me. By morning, the trials of the previous day seemed softened by the dawn. The sky shifted from black to pale pink, the cliffs glowing gold as the sun rose. We brewed a pot of bitter cowboy coffee, sitting side by side in silence, watching the desert wake. The exhaustion was still there, but so was a strange kind of pride. We'd been tested, scared half out of our wits, and yet here we were, together, stronger for it. Before breaking camp, I walked out into the wash and looked back at the canyon mouth. From a distance, it looked harmless, just another crease in the land. But I knew better now. I knew what waited inside. The choke points, the drops, the shadows that could make your chest tighten. And I knew, too, the quiet lessons it left behind. Respect the land, prepare better, and never underestimate the desert's silence. As we packed up, my wife chuckled and said, "Next time, let's just take the dirt road." I laughed, though a part of me knew we'd end up chasing some other shortcut adventure again. That's the thing about these trips. You don't always plan for the mishaps, but they're the stories you remember most. And as the fire smoke fades from memory and the stars come back, night after night, I carry that canyon with me, not as a place we conquered, but as a reminder of just how alive the wild can make you feel when it pushes you to the edge and then lets you walk away. The night started with a strange silence, one of those still, heavy evenings when the woods seemed to be holding their breath. I was camped along the edge of a narrow canyon in southern Utah, where the sandstone walls glowed red in the fading sun. My wife and I had set out earlier that day on what I thought was going to be a simple loop hike, up through a slot canyon, across the high desert, and back down into the wash where our camp waited. I'd read a few reports online and convinced myself it would be straightforward. That confidence didn't last long. The slot was tighter than I'd expected. I had to shimmy sideways for long stretches, scraping my pack against the walls. The air grew cooler in there, damp and close. With echoes bouncing around from the smallest pebble, I nudged loose. At one point, my chest stuck against the sandstone, and I had to exhale completely just to slide through. My wife laughed nervously at my grumbling, but I could see the worry in her eyes too. When we finally chimneyed our way up and out of the slot, we found ourselves on a barren plateau of slick rock and desert brush. The sun beat down on us, burning away what little moisture we had left in our throats. Every direction looked the same. Flat horizons, broken by distant cliffs. And I began to wonder if I'd underestimated just how complicated the navigation might be. The first real scare came as we were crossing above another narrow canyon. My wife was down climbing a slope of loose rock when a chunk gave way beneath her boots. She fell 8 feet, landing hard, but thankfully not breaking anything. She sat there on the rock, pale and shaking, her breath coming in short bursts. That was the moment the adventure stopped being fun and started feeling serious. We decided then and there to abandon my loop plan and head down the drainage, figuring all the canyons must eventually feed back toward the wash where our camp waited. It sounded simple enough, but the desert has a way of humbling you. We started working our way down the canyon, thinking gravity would be our guide. The sandstone walls rose higher and tighter around us, shutting out the sun until we were walking in cool shade. For a while, it felt almost comforting, quiet except for the scuff of our boots and the occasional call of a raven overhead. But that comfort ended when we hit the first dry fall. It wasn't enormous, but still high enough to make us stop and stare. The chute of polished rock sloped steeply downward before dropping 5 feet onto a ledge. Not a sheer cliff, but steep enough that if you slipped, you'd tumble. I went first, lowering myself with my hands pressed against the sandstone, sliding slowly until my boots lost traction and I landed with a thud at the bottom. My wife followed, sliding with more hesitation, and I caught her by the arms to steady her. We laughed nervously, but I could feel the tension in her grip. This was no trail. It was improvisation at every turn. The second dry fall came not long after, and this one was worse. A 20-foot crack split the canyon, narrowing as it dropped. To go down meant wedging ourselves into that chute and inching downward with our backs against one wall and our boots braced against the other. No ropes, no harnesses, just grit and careful movements. My wife looked at me, her face pale. I could see the doubt in her eyes, but there was no going back. Climbing back up slick sandstone is harder than descending. I went first again, pressing my body against the cool stone and easing down inch by inch. My legs trembled with the effort, but eventually my boots touched the canyon floor. I looked up, guiding her through the same slow process. She froze halfway, her breaths coming fast and shallow. "You're fine," I called up. "One step at a time. You've got this." I kept my voice steady, though my heart was pounding harder than the echoes of her boots scraping against the rock. When she finally dropped down beside me, we hugged, both of us shaking from the release of fear. We pressed on. The canyon twisted tighter, at times so narrow I had to remove my pack and push it ahead of me. My shoulders scraped both walls, the sandstone leaving faint burns on my skin. I squeezed through one particularly nasty choke point, my chest flattening as I exhaled all the air from my lungs. For a terrifying moment, I thought I was stuck. My pulse hammered in my ears, and the air felt thinner, heavier. Then, with one last shove, I popped free, stumbling forward into open space. My wife followed, emerging red-faced but smiling weakly, as if she too had felt the canyon's grip and didn't like how close it had come. The sun was setting now, shadows stretching long across the stone. We had to move faster if we wanted to make it back before dark. And that was when the canyon narrowed again, and I realized the desert wasn't done testing us. The walls began to squeeze us tighter than ever, twisting into shapes that seemed almost deliberate, as though the canyon itself wanted to trap us. The air grew still and cool, smelling faintly of damp stone, though we hadn't seen water for hours. Every step forward felt like a gamble. What would be waiting around the next bend? Another drop. A dead end. We came to a section where the canyon ceiling dipped so low that we had to crouch and shuffle sideways. My pack scraped overhead, the sound like sandpaper on bone. When I finally wriggled through, I found myself staring at another drop-off, this one hidden in shadow. I tossed a pebble and waited for the clink. It came a heartbeat later, maybe 12 or 15 feet down. Doable, but not without risk. We sat on the edge, trying to think it through. Climbing back wasn't really an option anymore. The canyon behind us had closed in too tight. The obstacles too sheer. Forward was the only direction left. I dropped my pack down first, watching it puff up a little cloud of dust as it landed. Then I swung myself over the lip, hands gripping the sandstone until my arms burned. My boots searched for a ledge, found one, and I eased myself down slowly, then jumped the last few feet. I landed solid. My wife followed, and though she hesitated longer this time, she made it safely. Her hands and knees scraped raw, but her spirit intact. We took a moment there in the dusty hollow, catching our breath. The silence so complete that I swear I could hear both of our hearts racing. As we pressed on, the canyon gave us one final trial. Ahead, it narrowed into a fissure no wider than my shoulders. The walls were smooth, polished by centuries of flash floods. There was no choice but to push through. I went first, exhaling every ounce of air to squeeze forward, inch by inch. The stone pressed my chest and back, the heat of the day still radiating from it, and for a moment I felt panic claw at me. I forced myself to focus on the feel of the rock under my palms, the scrape of my boots moving forward, the promise of open air just beyond. When I popped free at last, I stumbled into a wider chamber where the walls rose high and the evening light filtered down in thin golden ribbons. My wife emerged a moment later, flushed and breathing hard, but smiling now, the relief almost radiant on her face. We were through the worst of it. The canyon began to slope downward, opening little by little. The sound of wind through sagebrush reached our ears, and with it the faint smell of desert dust. We knew then we were close to the wash, close to camp. But the sun was already sinking, the shadows deepening into something heavier, and the desert at night is no place to wander without care. We pushed on, racing the dusk, not yet sure if we'd make it before true darkness fell. By the time we reached the mouth of the canyon, twilight had painted the desert in dusky purples and deep blues. The last sliver of sun clung stubbornly to the western cliffs, but shadows were winning the fight. Our boots found the sandy floor of the wash, and for the first time in hours, the walls fell away, opening to a horizon scattered with sage and twisted juniper. Relief hit me like a wave, but so did exhaustion. We paused to catch our breath, listening. The desert at night has its own voice, the whisper of wind threading through brush, the distant call of a night bird, the faint hum of crickets beginning their chorus. It was beautiful, but it carried a weight too, reminding us just how small we were out there, two figures in a vast wilderness with the dark closing in. We turned downstream, following the wash. The sand was soft, and every step dragged against our tired legs. My wife stumbled once, catching herself on my shoulder. She didn't complain, but I could see how much the fall earlier had shaken her. Her ankle had stiffened, and each uneven step drew a sharp breath through her teeth. I offered to carry her pack, but she shook her head with a stubborn smile. As the stars began to emerge, I felt a pang of worry. The desert sky is breathtaking, a black velvet canvas scattered with diamonds, but it also makes you realize just how quickly night erases the land. Shapes melted into shadows, and the wash branched, in places where it was hard to tell which way was right. I tried to read the ground, looking for familiar patterns, scanning the skyline for landmarks I thought I'd noticed earlier that day. Just when doubt was beginning to gnaw at me, we caught sight of something that made my chest loosen. The faint glow of our camp lantern, left burning low in the distance. It flickered against the canyon wall like a beacon, guiding us home. We quickened our pace, hearts lifting with each step. When we stumbled into camp at last, it was full dark. The fire pit lay cold, and the tent sagged slightly, where the stakes had loosened in the sand. But I swear I've never seen a campsite look more welcoming. We dropped our packs and collapsed onto the ground, laughing breathlessly at our own foolishness. My wife stretched out flat on her back, staring up at the stars, and whispered, "I don't think I've ever been so glad to see a tent." We were scratched, bruised, and bone-weary, but safe. The canyon had tested us, stripped us of any illusion of control, and in its own way, delivered us back with a lesson I wouldn't soon forget.